Welcome to the Vandy Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Lee. Our guest today will be Mitch Light. We thank our title sponsor, Wellspire, Nashville's Learning and Development Center. Wellspire offers personal and professional development opportunities in a beautiful facility in the Gulch neighborhood. Stop by for an event with world-renowned speakers or host an off-site event that will wow your team or your clients. We thank our other title sponsor, the Well Coffee House, which turns coffee into water and has a mission to bring clean water to the world. Today's news presented by Sutherland & Belk, a Nashville-based injury law firm. Sutherland & Belk is committed to fighting for those who've been injured in car, motorcycle, and truck accidents. Check them out at sbinjurylaw.com. Vanderbilt's matchup for the College World Series has been set. The Commodores play who else? Louisville. Sunday, 1 Central is the first pitch time in Omaha. Vanderbilt's side of the bracket also contains Auburn and Mississippi State, so the Commodores will play either the winner or the loser of the game between those two schools accordingly in round 2. The guest line is presented by Boll & Branch, started by Vanderbilt graduates Scott and Missy Tannen. I've slept on Boll & Branch sheets for several years now. They are just incredible, and I had no idea what I was missing until I got them. The sheets are fair trade certified, which means they've been made under safe conditions by men and women who are treated and paid fairly. Try them for a month. You can return them for free, but you will not want to. Once you have the sheets, try the mattress. That was voted best mattress of 2018. Go to bollandbranch.com. That is spelled B-O-L-L, and enter the promo code Vandy. That is V-A-N-D-Y. Get $50 off your first set of sheets. Mitch Light joins us now. You know him as the sideline reporter for Vanderbilt football. He's also an executive editor at Athlon Magazine. Mitch, thank you for joining us. It has been quite a week for Vanderbilt baseball.
Yes, definitely. Obviously very eventful after last year's eventful Super Regionals and a wide range of emotions. It's amazing how different the overall feel of a fan base can change in a matter of 24 hours, and how different it is a 3-game series, obviously the Super Regional with your seasons on the line, than it is during the regular season. You know, Vanderbilt this year at least did not have have to deal with the emotions or whatever you want to call it of losing a Friday night start. But during the regular season, you lose on a Friday night, you just say, okay, we'll come back and win the next two. It's obviously a lot more pressure on you in the Super Regionals. But I was obviously there for all 3 games this weekend, and it was highly entertaining.
The psychology of postseason and situations and things is fascinating because you never want to lose a game. At the same time, losing can be a gift. And you saw Vanderbilt face adversity in several ways. And I guess you could also say that the adversity that it faced the last 3 years stemming from Donnie Everett's death was probably greater than anything that they would face on the field. And I hope I'm not being insensitive by saying that, but obviously that's been a big storyline, the adversity the team has been through. But it's been weird because this team hasn't lost much. You saw some adversity in the SEC tournament, but, you know, even if they lose that game to Ole Miss, you know it doesn't really matter. They're still going to get probably a 1, 2, or 3 seed in the tournament. And life goes on. There's nothing really at stake there other than, okay, you didn't get a tournament championship, which is nice, but it doesn't really mean a ton. So fast forward to now, they had not lost a game 1 of a series all year. And I think there's a little bit of a different mindset going into a game 2 or game 3. It was probably a situation where you're glad it happened. You probably would prefer to deal with that early in the season, but it was just a weird dynamic with the season with all the winning, and the lack of adversity, I think, caused some nervousness heading into games 2 and 3 because this was a new thing for them.
Yeah, I mean, I want to preface this by saying I've never played sports beyond high school at a high level like this where there's a lot more at stake, so I don't, I've never been in their shoes, but I think I can confidently say, as someone who follows the program closer, and I don't always feel this way. I'm not one of these losing is a good thing at times, but I think this team is better off now having lost Friday night than had they just blown through the Super Regional. Now, there's certain things that weren't great signs Friday night. When you lose like that, there's certain things you don't do well. And, a loss like that can uncover some, so all the concerns that we had about this team. And I always say this, I probably said it last week on the podcast about, when it's sort of like Alabama football, when you're trying to find things that a team doesn't do well because it does so many things well. Some of the things we were concerned about, consistent starting pitching. Drake Fellows has had innings where he hasn't been great, or had a couple innings he's usually bounced back. Vanderbilt's bullpen, while very talented, struggles. Sometimes some of those guys have trouble throwing strikes. Vanderbilt's hitters, I guess it was Saturday. It was more of the deal with the changeup, some of the off-speed stuff. But I guess my point being, Friday exposed, if that's the right word, some of the concerns about this team. Hugh Fisher comes in a tight game and can't throw a strike, hits 2 batters, and the game gets away. Drake Fellows, gets hit harder than he has all year. So putting aside the actual reasons for the loss, I think the fact that they lost is fine going forward. I think that's kind of what you're saying. So I'm kind of just agreeing from a psychological standpoint. Like, it doesn't matter what fans and media think. It really only matters how that team reacts, and you have to like the way they reacted.
Yeah, and I'm with you. I did not play competitive sports at anywhere near that level. And so maybe the way players process it differently is the way you and I do, but I've seen it, and I've heard Tim Corbin talk about it. And as much of a sabermetrics guy as I tend to be, I look to that first and then kind of look for the other things for things. I think the psychological portion of this, especially with college-age kids, is enormous.
Yeah, and I think baseball, of all sports, it can be the most frustrating, where you can do things the right way and not experience success on a small sample size. For the course of the season and all, usually it balances out. But I thought Saturday in a high-pressure game, and Tim Corbin alluded to this on one of those radio appearances yesterday, Vanderbilt hit the ball hard early in the first couple innings and just hitting some loud outs. And I've said this before. I don't know what Ty Duvall did to the baseball gods as a young kid, but I've never seen someone hit more hard line drives to outfielders. But so that adds to the frustration. Where in basketball, if you shoot the ball well, it's going to go in. Like, if that makes sense. Football, if you're stronger and you're ready to play, you're going to block and you're going to open up holes. Baseball, you can hit the ball right in the nose and it can go right to someone. You can make the perfect pitch and they can have a blue pit. So in a small one-game sample size, that adds to can lead to frustration, and it adds to the anxiety that I felt you could sense in the first few innings in that stadium on Saturday.
Those are excellent points. And, of course, the other part of baseball is the matchups. Not necessarily who's better, but how do you match up? I think that they got a really tough draw because I'm looking at Louisville. Reed Detmers is an ace. His ERA is 2.85. You look at the numbers underneath that, it should be about a run to a half run lower. He struck out batters. He struck out 39% of the batters he faced. Just to give you an idea, Ethan Small struck out 42%. So he was almost at that level. Vanderbilt's highest, Tyler Brown, I think, struck out 34%. So Detmer strikes out more batters with more frequency as a rate stat than anybody on Vanderbilt's team. First things first, you got to take the game one matchup. And although Vanderbilt beat Louisville in Louisville, it was a different game with a different starting pitcher on the mound. I think this is, other than facing Mississippi State in game one, I don't know that anybody's got a tougher draw in the bracket than Vanderbilt got.
Yeah, no, I agree. Sure, it's nice Vanderbilt won that midweek game, but that will mean nothing when the teams play on Saturday or Sunday. I agree. I don't know the makeup of all these teams in Omaha, but it just matters so much who you play on. Like, let's say, I don't know JT Ginn's status. Did he pitch? I didn't follow it close enough. How much did he pitch on Saturday or the second game of that regional?
He threw 30-something pitches in game one of the regional. It did not throw in the super. Peyton Plumlee was their number two. Yeah.
Right. So he did not throw in the supers. So how, Mississippi State has deep pitching, but the fall off right now between Small and someone else is pretty great. It's just agreeing with your point, echoing what you're saying. Just the matchups are so important. Where obviously, if you saw the odds change from Vanderbilt being the betting favorite to now Vanderbilt and Arkansas being co-favorites, I'm not a hardcore gambler, but my guess is because Arkansas has a much friendlier side of the bracket and has an easier path to get to the championship game. And I think a lot of that is based on the fact that, yes, Vanderbilt has a tough game one matchup, and then obviously still has Mississippi State to deal with. So, hey, it is what it is. And, I think Vanderbilt in 2011 had a tough draw as well with, probably being underseeded and getting North Carolina and Florida on its side of the bracket. So, just you got to deal with it. I'm sure the guys aren't even thinking twice about it. That's our job to look at the matchups. The coaching staff looks at the matchups, but they're not bemoaning the fact that it's Louisville. They're just trying to figure out a way to beat them.
Yeah, I think the betting thing was two things. I do think Vanderbilt has got a tougher draw. Now, I don't think either draw is easy. I think Texas Tech has been a consistent Omaha team on the other side. Michigan, I think, is better than people think Michigan is. On the other side, you got Arkansas, who was in the title round last year, and then the other team there is, oh, good grief, Florida State, who is the hot team, the storyline that everybody likes with Mike Martin. That's a team that's been to Omaha. Yeah, exactly. So there's that, but I do think their half is tougher, and I think that the odds thing was priced from that point. Vanderbilt on paper had the easiest super regional matchup of anybody. No, it did not turn out to be easy, but that's how it was. So I think from the standpoint of Arkansas and Vanderbilt a few days ago, I think Arkansas had a tougher path to get to Omaha, getting through an Ole Miss team, which had a little bit had its number that year while Vanderbilt had Duke. So I think that was the other factor in the odds changing.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
What do you think of the Omaha field as a whole? Because I think it's fascinating. You've got storylines pretty much everywhere you look, including Auburn and Florida State. You got Michigan being there for the first time since '64, and I think, again, a really good Michigan team, which knocked off the number one overall seed UCLA in its ballpark. I just think maybe it's a recency bias. I think this bracket is as fun just from a detached observer standpoint for storylines as I can remember.
Yeah, I agree, and I'd have to compare it to previous fields, but you kind of touched on all. Every team has a good storyline, attached to it. You got a few Cinderellas like Auburn and Michigan, then Florida State. Hard to call them a Cinderella. This specific team is. And Texas Tech is sort of like, maybe Vanderbilt was before it won the title, just kind of a program that's gotten good as of late and hasn't knocked the door down. Louisville's the same, the same situation. It's really amazing, just sort of a side note here, about the rise of college baseball. We talk about that a lot, but there's about 4 or 5 programs, and it's all pretty much because of a coach and a commitment from a school. But Louisville, Virginia, and Vanderbilt and TCU are 4 programs that really got good at the same time and had the same coach. In Texas Tech, I'll throw in there, but Tim Tadlock hasn't been there nearly as long. So they're kind of a more new emerging program. But it's amazing how that I think all those coaches were probably hired within, a 2-3 year period in the 2003 to 2005 range in all those schools. And Arkansas too. Arkansas had some hard times before, making the coaching change there, and has been very good over the last 12, 15 years as well.
You make a great point, and I think Duke is kind of on its way, time will tell, to becoming a real force in college baseball as well.
Yeah, what they, I think I really liked Pollard's press conferences. I didn't necessarily like his actions on the field, but that's what, he can do what he wants, gamesmanship, all that stuff. But I just listened to him in his press conferences. I remember last year listening to him before and after Vanderbilt played Duke. I like him, and I think they are. I don't know I might be misspeaking here, but I don't think they've necessarily made the financial and the overall commitment that Vanderbilt, some of those other schools, have done to baseball. Like, don't they don't have an on-campus stadium, do they? Don't they play at the Durham Bulls Park?
I think that sounds right. I'm not sure. But yeah, I don't think they put the money into it that Vanderbilt has.
Yeah, and he alluded to that in this post game. You might have been there. He says the next step is we've got to host this thing. He realized how tough it is to go on the road last year at Texas Tech and at Vanderbilt. good on campus venues and stuff. So he's like, they need to make that next step. But I agree. They're not recruiting to the level that Tim Corbin was early in his tenure. But they were a good team, no doubt. I mean, it's amazing to think that team at one point was 3-9 in the ACC, and they've had the injuries on the pitching staff. So, I agree. But it just shows you get the right coach and the right commitment at the right time, and it can be done in a sport in which, even if you've got no tradition.
Well, we're close to being about halfway done with the time that you've got today. I wanted to spend more of the podcast today focusing on what we saw on offense, because I talked a lot about the pitching and Kumar Rocker yesterday with Chip Frederick, but I can't go by without discussing what Rocker did and just getting your take on it.
Yeah. Okay. And I mean, like I told you before, it's not a hard, my computer's not going to blow up at 11 o'clock or 11:10. So when we're recording this, so I mean, I've heard all the talk. I've had more time to think about it. There's a lot of right after it occurred, comparing it to great Vanderbilt performances. And I've got nothing, I've been around since basically 1989-90 was my freshman year. I think the most obvious comparison is the Shane Foster 42-point game on senior night. The stakes weren't as high. That was an NCAA tournament team with or without that victory. Every win helps your seeding, and you never know. Maybe Vanderbilt loses that game. They're not a 4 seed. They don't play Siena, and they don't lose. So maybe it's Shane Foster's fault that Vanderbilt lost in the first round. I'm kidding, of course. Just the one stat that I always point to in that Shane Foster game is that he made 9 straight threes, and that every shot Vanderbilt was either losing or the game was tied. So just the pressure on every shot. But as far as overall performance, I think you have to put Rocker number one based on what was at stake. And not all, I mean, a no-hitter is an unbelievable occurrence. It happens rarely, but not all of them are created equally. Like, you add 3 elements to that no-hitter. One was the pressure of the situation, which we've talked about. 2 was the fact that I think there was 1, maybe 2 hard hit balls, the first play of the game, and then that line drive to Bleday, and then the strikeout total. You can throw a no-hitter and maybe give up 4 or 5 line drives and, get a little lucky, some guys make great plays. That was as dominating of an effort as I've seen from a college pitcher. I was sitting with Willie Donick, and he kept making the point. It was like a little league game. It was like Danny Almonte or whatever, just where one kid, and Kumar Rocker's actually young. He's not 4 years older than everyone else, like in that case, but where you got one pitcher in little league sometimes who's just so much more dominant, physically, impressive than the kids he's pitching to. That's what it looked like. I mean, the fact that it was 19 strikeouts swinging on the same pitch it's mind-boggling.
I bet it felt like facing Danny Almonte in high school.
Yeah. I mean, the in the 8th and the 9th innings were just, you go back and watch them and just how little, it was like a victory when those guys fouled off a pitch. So yeah, I mean, just his demeanor was great. I thought, his the way he was calm on the mound, except when he needed to, to have some fire, when he kind of barked at the bench when Pollard called that timeout. I just, everything about his performance, it wasn't a perfect game, but basically everything about his performance was perfect.
Your thoughts on the hitting? I was concerned for them that they hit the ball okay on Friday, and then I think maybe hitting some tough outs late. I don't remember as much that one, but I remember Saturday they were hitting the ball fairly well. Now, taking nothing away from Jarvis, he pitched well, and you could pitch well against their lineup and still get stung, but there were a lot of balls that were hit hard. They were striking out some. The combination of those two things of facing a tough guy and not having anything to show for it when you do make good contact, I thought had potential to get in their heads. And I think it did for a while to me. How did you see their hitting this weekend?
Sort of like that. I mean, like I said earlier, Saturday, and that added to some of the frustration earlier. I thought they were hitting the ball hard after coming off a big loss. It can get frustrating if you hit the ball right at them. That's better than, not hitting it hard. So no, I thought it was, Duke's first 2 pitchers were very good. I mean, I think you saw on Twitter where Aaron Fitt said that he thought Jarvis's changeup was one of the best he's seen in college baseball this year, and it was outstanding. And what have we seen from Vanderbilt hitters over the years? They have trouble. A lot of teams do, but they have a lot of free swingers or big hitters have trouble with the off speed stuff. So I thought, that they needed to get into the bullpen. They did get into the bullpen. I know Duke's closer had the injury with the cut there, but he had also given up a triple to DeMarco there. So I thought that overall the hitting for the weekend was fine against two frontline pitchers who've been pitching well. Obviously, they didn't hit the ball great, but once they got into the bullpen and got deeper into that staff, obviously Sunday was a different story. And the ball seemed to be carrying, obviously, on Sunday a little bit better. A couple, you think about the home run that Martin's second home run didn't look like it was hit as hard as the ball he hit when Vanderbilt was down 3, I believe, Friday night, and he hit one to the warning track. So different days, ball carries differently. But when you score, I guess 5 runs, 3 runs, and then 12 runs, it's hard to be too critical of an offense.
You make a good point. I didn't think the ball was carrying much Friday. I thought you got one up, and it just was almost a death sentence. I don't know if it was the colder, damper air or what it was, but you make a good point. It seemed like, and I was not able to be there Sunday. I had to watch that one from TV due to family commitment, but it did seem like the ball carried better Sunday than it had.
Yeah, it definitely did, and not taking anything away from those guys, but I thought Martin's second home run, and I thought Julian Infante's home run, although he crushed it, I thought it was going to get in the gap that went over the wall there, and Steven Scott hit what I thought might have been a fly ball that got over. So, yeah, I think the ball definitely carried better on Sunday.
The Bleday shift is fascinating because you flash back to the Auburn game of the SEC tournament, and the commentators made such a big deal of him hitting lefties and going the other way. And we saw that from JJ all year, that he was able to go in different directions with just about anything. I mean, he was so versatile as a hitter. I wonder, I have 2 trains of thought here. I think that how do you say this? I guess analytics right now, you're able to pick up on a lot of things and hitting patterns and pick up on stuff that you couldn't even 5-10 years ago because of video. On the other hand, there's the fact that he hit to the other field so well. I wonder if the shifting was done maybe more of just as a way to get in his head. In other words, we don't think we can beat Vanderbilt straight up, so let's try to find something and maybe create something with Bleday to maybe have him downing a little bit as much as it was advanced intelligence. I don't know the answer to that. That may be a crazy theory, but what did you make of the shift?
I mean, it was interesting, and it's easy to sit here and say it worked for the most part because his numbers against Indiana State, who's shifted the same way, and Duke weren't great. I would also attribute that to, baseball's a very streaky sport. Like I saw a stat where Jake Mangum, and I'm kind of improvising the numbers here, first 40 games was hitting 4-20, and this is heading into the Super Regionals. I think the last 10 games he was hitting 140. So, Jake Mangum, one of the best hitters in the country, was also not, was on a cold stretch there. So that's what happens. You're not going to go 5 for 5 every game. So I'm sure, he's got a lot going on, the draft, all this stuff and all the attention he got from there. And he did hit the ball. It's not like he didn't hit the ball hard at all the last 2 weekends. He did. It didn't go over. So I can't sit here and speculate on whether or not the shift at the time he decided to bunt, it went back to the pitcher rather than down the line. Cause it would, that's, you'd like to counter the shift by making him pay for it with a bunt.
What else stood out to you with the hitters up and down the lineup this weekend?
Trying to think. I mean, obviously the big blow, I thought DeMarco had a good offensive weekend. He hit the ball, he hit the triple on Saturday night to ignite the rally, then hit the big home run. I thought Infante looked really bad Friday. And then even Saturday, his first at bat looked really bad, but then he got the bat on the ball a couple times, hit the ball hard once, and then had the bunt. Harry Ray kind of snapped out of he had been in after such a great SEC tournament, had not been hitting well in the regional in the Super, and then hit the ball well on Sunday. Obviously good to see Martin hit the 2 home runs, because before Sunday, Vanderbilt for the whole regional and Super Regional had been getting it done without Martin and Bleday hitting the ball, as well as they had in previous years. So Nothing really other than, ran some good pitching Friday and Saturday, then abused mediocre to bad pitching on Sunday.
How do you think that park plays for them in Omaha? Because they're a home run hitting team and the fences are a little bit longer. I guess on one hand, you could say, well, they've got hitters who've got power to get it out of any park they'd play in. And the other factor is they do hit a lot of balls to the gaps. They are fast. Austin Martin, Ethan Paul, just a lot of guys in the lineup can run fairly well. Do you think that's a good park for them? I mean, I guess my answer is sort of any park's good for them because they hit well, but what do you make of them hitting in TD Ameritrade?
Well, I don't think it's tailor-made for Vanderbilt this year as much as it is in previous years, but I think, like you make the good point, they've got power hitters that can hit it out of any park. And I think I saw during the Big Ten tournament, which was at TD Ameritrade, that there are more home run. Obviously it's not like it was in 2014 when Vanderbilt won the national title and there was only a couple, 3 or 4 home runs hit the entire time. There's been more in recent years. I think this year, with all the games played there's more home runs hit per game at TD Ameritrade than any season since it's opened. Hope I got that stat right. Couple things too. It's a big outfield. I don't think Vanderbilt's a bad defensive outfield, but I don't think it's a great defensive outfield as far as covering ground. So that could be an issue. Again, I think it's probably just an average defensive outfield, but you mentioned it's a team that hits the ball in the gap a lot too. It's got some, Martin and Ray. Ray's not a power hitter, but he hits a lot of line drives that can get into the gap and use his speed there. So I don't think it's going to be Vanderbilt's not going to win or lose the national title because of the park they play in. I guess is my point.
Yeah, you actually made the point I was about to ask you about. I think that their defense, there's not really a weak point on this team. It's just some things are stronger than others. I know the bullpen has been shaky at times, but you start looking around and comparing them to others, it's still a really good, if not elite, bullpen. But I'm with you. I don't know if it's a concern, but in a big park where you've got to track down fly balls in key spots, they've had outfields that were more suited to that than this one.
Yeah, I mean, I think Scott's probably, he's not a natural, maybe in any position. He's a great hitter, and he did great, really solid job catching. And I don't remember him making a bad play in the outfield this year, but I just don't see him as a guy that's covering a ton of ground. And DeMarco has, they played really shallow. I thought the ball that went over his head that he almost made that great catch on, I was surprised how shallow he was playing. And Bleday is a good outfielder, but it's just not. I just don't see it as one that just didn't cover a ton of ground.
Yeah, the interesting thing, and I don't think they'll do this, but I'll just throw it out there. When they've had Isaiah Thomas in the game, he has played center field over DeMarco at times. And you've had Cooper Davis that has played some left. Combu Fentress has been their defensive replacement in center and sometimes in left. I do wonder if they get in a spot, if there's some chance that they might not make some substitutions. Again, I tend to think not, because they've not done that recently, but it is a different ballpark and a different stage. And I'll just throw that out there just in case it does happen.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't shock me. I don't see it happening unless I don't know, maybe you got a 5-2 lead going to the 9th inning or something like that. But I think Thomas hasn't hit in a while. Fentress obviously pretty much a non-factor. Defense is important, but then you risk if those guys come around to get in the lineup, but then there's pinch, they've got Jason Gonzalez, they've got Cooper Davis, they've got guys who can pinch hit. So I guess it's an interesting thought, and we will find out that Vanderbilt's in a position where they need defensive replacements with the late lead.
Yeah, the other issue there too is you could be a good defender, but doing it on that stage is different. I mean, those outfielders have logged a lot of innings in the outfield, and even if you think a guy on the bench is better, you may not want to take that chance because you kind of know how the guys out there are going to react.
Right. I think not to pick on him because he obviously had the biggest hit in the history of Vanderbilt baseball, but I think John Norwood misplayed a fly ball in center, and he had been a pretty solid outfielder. And I'm talking during the College World Series in 2014. Forgot the exact situation, but didn't get a good read on a fly ball and got into the gap.
Yeah, I remember that too. I don't remember the game, but I remember that happening kind of vaguely. Let's go to the mailbag, which is sponsored by Vanderbilt fan and independent insurance agent Josh Minton of Brentwood. Are you in the market for auto, motorcycle, home, renters, or landlord insurance? or life or commercial insurance? If so, call Josh 615-933-1979. Email him at josh@hqinsurance.com. Follow him on Facebook at facebook.com/JD Minton HQ. He is my insurance agent. I hope you'll make him yours. Okay, this one from Highlands Door. He asked me if I noticed Tyler Brown's velocity was down at all in his quick ninth inning appearance on Sunday. I did not notice live. I meant to check that, did not. Unfortunately, the way ESPN works, I was trying to get the answer as we're doing this and run through the broadcast feed. I had DVR'd it, well, because of the rain delay thing.
Right.
It ran out after 3.5 hours. It's on the ESPN app, but unfortunately it will not let you fast forward. So I'm trying to play it to see what, but by the time this podcast is done, I still won't be there. So I will turn that to you and ask you if you remember looking at radar gun readings on TV or on the big gun in the stadium.
Yeah, I was there. I don't think his velocity was down at all. In fact, I think I looked at it once and it was in the mid-90s on one pitch. So I thought he looked great and fresh and confident and everything. So Again, I can't sit here and say I looked at every pitch, but I did not know. Just looking at him and then glancing at the radar and on the scoreboard, I don't think his velocity was down at all.
Yeah, his velo I know was at 91 at times last weekend. So if he's back up to 95, that's where he sits. The pitch tipping thing is interesting, and Chip Frederick commented on him holding his glove differently. Again, he has been so hot and cold. It makes me think it probably was a pitch tipping issue, which does happen from time to time. I remember I asked somebody who was really connected with them. I don't know if you remember the SEC tournament game in Carson Fulmer's junior year, where like he had just been mowing everybody down, and A&M was taking batting practice off him that day, essentially.
Well, I think they said after Rob Childress coached him that summer, and basically picked up a tip, that he was tipping his pitches. So it happens. And hey, Tyler Brown's been amazing this year, except he's got hit hard 3 times, and all 3 times he's got hit really hard.
Yeah, and that tip in particular was like, I think if I remember this correctly, it was like a breathing pattern that they think that they picked up on, which I would never think to check, but that's
weird.
That's how advanced some of these coaches are in looking for stuff. So it's a little bit encouraging in a way that they picked up on something. At the same time, it's a little bit concerning that maybe this is twice that it's happened now, and maybe they fix one tip and another one emerges. I don't know how it works, but that's kind of how I see it.
Yeah.
Let's see. Yeah. Switching gears to basketball, Memorial Magic. I like this. How many basketball coaches does it take to win an SEC basketball game? Seriously, though, based on what other programs with this many staff members do, will all these assistants and directors and analysts, what will they do? Will Stackhouse be able to focus on coaching, or all his time be taken up by managing his staff?
No, I think that's a great point. I don't think he's going to have any time for coaching because he's going to be – no, I'm just kidding. I think it's the opposite. Like, sure, it's a lot of people. I can't sit here and tell you what everyone's going to do. But I think I talked to Stackhouse for a story for Vanderbilt magazine, and that his point was he wants to be able to – he wants to do the coaching. He wants to be as involved in everything aspects of coaching and have a big staff to handle all the other stuff. Like he said, he wants to be a mentor to these players, but he wants these guys to have a lot of different mentors. And that's why he specifically mentioned James Strong as a guy who, had been to Vanderbilt. And he said he didn't want to be a hypocrite because when he, as a Carolina guy, he always wanted at least one Carolina guy on that staff who played at Carolina. So he said, I got this job here and I wanted at least one Vanderbilt guy. And that's why he has some women on his staff. He thinks these kids, they need that female influence too on the staff. So sure, they've got a lot of guys, and it was made clear that when he took the job with Malcolm Turner, that he wanted to be able to have a lot of support staff, and obviously he's got it. I don't know how it compares to the SEC. I looked at, Alabama, Nate Oates, new coach there. I think he's got 5 support staff people. You got your 3 head coach, your 3 assistant coaches, and then you got support staff, and I think he has 5. I looked at Texas A&M. Because Buzz Williams, but they don't list any assistant coaches yet. But Buzz Williams is kind of high maintenance guy. I could see him having a lot of a big staff there. So, I think it's probably in big picture, it's probably a good sign because you see that he's been able to hire a lot of people, and obviously these people get paid, so that they're spending the money that the head coach thinks they need to spend.
Mitch, is there anything on your mind worth discussing today that we did not get into?
Not really. I will be. I assume you're going to Omaha. Is that correct?
I am going to Omaha. We will be leaving, unfortunately, Sunday morning. My wife works Friday. We will need Saturday to pack and get ready. So we're trying to formulate a plan to drive out there and maybe stop in St. Louis or somewhere and watch the game and then drive on. So it's going to be a little bit of difficulty in getting out there. I don't know that I will be able to make the last game or two if they play to the end, but I should be there for a lot of it. And you know how these things go. You never know that they win or lose. But yes, I'm going to be out there, and I think you were driving your son out there.
Yeah, we're leaving Saturday. It was just got to the point where they took so long to announce the matchups that the plane tickets got so expensive. So we're driving. We're leaving Saturday, and we'll be there Sunday. We're going to the first two games. So we went in 2000. I went in 2011 with a bunch of friends from college, and then 2014, my wife and son and I drove out. And he was 13. He was he was 10. So he was young. He was old enough to appreciate it, but I think now he's going to be a sophomore in high school. We'll have a good time, and we're looking forward to it.
Yeah, it is a doable drive. My advice to people, and I've done it a few times, you could either go kind of halfway, which is probably Columbia, Missouri, or close to it. Or you could do this. This is probably what I would recommend. I would leave probably on a Saturday, and I would drive all the way to Kansas City, stop there, leave early, give yourself some time, and then drive. I think it's like 3 hours to Omaha from there. Maybe, I don't know if the Royals in town, but that's my advice. So
that's exactly what we're doing, because basically the hotels are so expensive in the Omaha area because there's so much going on there. So you figure one less night in the Omaha hotel. So we're basically just going to stay at a random hotel in Kansas City and then drive in for the game Sunday morning.
Mitch, thank you for joining us. Where can they find you on Twitter? Where can they find Athlon's edition of all your fine football previews?
Well, magazines are on sale at newsstands everywhere, and athlonsports.com/store. You can find the SEC mag with Keyshawn Vaughn on the cover, or our national mag, and I'm at Athlon Mitch on Twitter.
Thank you so much, Mitch. Be safe.
All right, man. Take care.
He's Mitch Light. I'm Chris Lee. Thanks for listening to the Vandy Sports Podcast. We will catch you again with more episodes coming later in the week.